My name is Karen Nickel, and I'm currently serving as the past president of the Minnesota Council of Teaching Languages and Cultures. We're super excited to be here today with Extempore and this big PD extravaganza. So thanks for having us. Appreciate it, Michael. And we are going to talk about a step-by-step process so that you'll be able to implement the Bilingual SEALs program. And specifically, it's going to be around the why and how. So Aomi, if you want to kind of skip over the next slide, it's just a description. And then to the next one, at the end of our presentation today, we're going to ask you to fill out a little feedback for us as well as for Extempore. And on the next slide, I'll spend just a little bit more time kind of prepping you for what's to come here. So we're going to immerse you, yes, that's a little joke, into the Bilingual SEAL program today. And our hope is that at the end, you will be familiar with the history and the intent of Bilingual SEALs. And you'll understand it better through an overview and outcomes and benefits. You'll be guided in a step-by-step process so that you'll be able to implement a program in your institution by using the resources that we offer. And then in the wrap-up, we'll just look at a quick look at upholding those intentions, as well as give you a reflection time, a little bit of time to reflect about your own next steps. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague at MCTLC, Araceli. Take it away.
Thank you, Karen. So as Hanke and Davin wrote, while the seal by literacy itself provides an appealing construct and fruitful idea to promote language and education in K-12 schools, it is important to understand the grassroots nature of its language policy. The initiative began in California in 2008, where advocates designed the seal by literacy to push back against a decade of English dominant policies guiding practices in schools after the passage of Proposition 227 in 1998, which severely limited opportunities for bilingual education. Following California's legislative efforts in 2011, other states across the nation adopted similar policies. And so as an overview and an outcome and benefits of the seal by literacy here in Minnesota. So the award levels, the number of college credits depends on the institution. So the seal in the broader legislation in which it sits, known as the LEAPS Act, was widely described as an attempt to reframe deficit discourses surrounding heritage language learners in the state. Minnesota has a high language proficiency standards and is a strong model for the seal by literacy because students have the possibility of obtaining credits for the seal by literacy scores, college credits. In 2018, Minnesota seals and certificates were awarded in Arabic, ASL, Chinese, French, German, Hindu, Japanese, Hmong, Karen, Latin, Oromo, Portuguese, Russian, Somali, Spanish, and Tamil. So Minnesota State Universities, but not the R1 universities of Minnesota, upon request by the student, will award college credits upon enrolling in the college. And as you can see, depending on their score, excuse me, if they are a low language level, they will have 2 semesters of college credits, and intermediate high, 3 semesters, and 4 semesters if they are in the bilingual platinum. Students do have the option of retaking a section of the test that they scored the lowest in. So if a student scored low in the writing or the speaking, they can retake that section, right? But before taking any of this, they do have to show that they are proficient in English. Excuse me. Some of the benefits of receiving a seal by literacy is not only the college credit, But for some students, it is the ability to have this in the resume, because it is a way of validating that they are fluent in another language other than English. And we have found that for students who are taking the CO biliteracy test as a heritage speaker, as a native speaker, it is more of a sense of pride that they're able to keep their language alive. And it is promoted differently across different schools in Minnesota. And they can take the test when they are in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. And the schools decide how they want to promote the CO biliteracy within their district, and also how they want to give students recognition for their test for the score that they received. Some schools are able to have these ceremonies with students during graduation, like the senior awards. Other schools have a separate ceremony for them where they invite family members to acknowledge that they have taken the test and are receiving credits. But once again, once they exit the high school, it is up to the student to advocate for these credits at the college level. And we're going to talk about how which steps are normally taken within here in Minnesota to get to the end point, which is a part of celebration. So with that, I will take it on. Ayomi.
Hi, thank you, Araceli. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ayumi Stockman. I am the World Languages Education Specialist with the Minnesota Department of Education. So I'm super thrilled to be able to team up with my colleagues in Minnesota and then to share what we do in Minnesota. So our section, I'm going to be tagging along with Lisa. We will talk about steps. So I have identified 7 big buckets in order to implement Minnesota bilingual seals. So those are all written up here. The first step is, of course, students recruitment and then identification. And I will talk a little bit about here and support what it means that comes with students recruitment and identification. And then the second piece is once you identify the students, you administer the assessment. And then after you administer the assessment, typically you receive the ratings from the testing companies, and then you identify awardees according to Minnesota's defined criteria. And after that, seals and proficiency certificate requests have to be submitted to the department agency. So then we will give schools the template for the certificate. And then also this request form also serves the purpose of reporting, so that as a Minnesota state can keep track of students' awardees in what languages students are receiving. And then the 5th bucket is very important, schools to keep a good record keeping. This is very important. And then also another piece is number 6, transcript notation. So that putting some type of notation on a student's transcript is required by law. So schools, that's another big bucket that schools have to do. And then lastly, number 7, informing families and students, and then perhaps a celebration piece. So we're going to look at each step a little bit detailed, and Lisa will share some examples. So the step 1, students recruitment and identification and support. So when you do this, the considerations are what languages are represented by your students. So that's number 1 consideration. So you may have language courses that's offered, which is kind of easy to capture the students, right? Because let's say if you have a Spanish class or Arabic class, Chinese class, you have the students. So that's one way to look at it. And then, of course, you also can't forget about multilingual learners, including English learners that represented in your school. So here, the second bullet here, multilingual learners, including English learners. There are multilingual learners who may not be captured. Any of those programs may exist in your school. And sometimes those multilingual learners, their linguistic diversity can be invisible. So schools have to dig deep into who serve in your schools. So typically, one of the things that I did when I was in Minneapolis was that to pull students' home languages data. And then that way you can also identify who you have in your school. So that's kind of a touch base on the method of identification and then recruitment. You may have some ideas, right, in order to really disseminate information about the program. You may use robocalls and flyers. I'm sure Lisa can also add some examples from her context, right, Lisa? Do you want to add at this point? Do you have some other examples of recruitment effort or identification?
Yeah, we would, if there is like a district-wide or a school-wide newsletter that goes to parents and or students, we would put notifications in that would run maybe like every other week for a month leading up to registration. If your district or school has social media accounts, we would put like blast notifications in there as well. What else? We would also have our world language teachers send emails home to their families, as well as our EL teachers sending emails home to families to make it a bit more personal and individual.
I'm sure there are many different ways that can be done, and you may have, participants may have some ideas too, right? So I forgot to talk about the support. So this support piece is that, so when students are captured through the program, or they have the English language teachers, that they get some type of support, like, the students who are in a program, they get the instructional support. But some multilingual learners whose their language, a heritage language, who may be working on their language skills outside of their school, such as through weekends, heritage community schools, some students may not have that support in terms of what type of language skills that they're expected to demonstrate, what kind of preparation they can do, as well as getting used to how to navigate the platform, all those kind of support. So you, at the time when you recruit students, identify what languages are represented. You may want to think about how you guys can help provide support those students through such as kind of a preparation sessions, couple weeks before the testing or something like that. So that's the support that I was talking about. So the step 2, so once you capture who the students are and you deliver assessments. Now the tricky piece is that in Minnesota, and I'm sure there are other states too, depending on what language, the accepted approved assessment can be different. So there are some variety of assessments that are accepted and approved in the state of Minnesota. So like Octopus Apple, Avant Stamp 4S, Stamp WS. Stamp WS stands for writing and speaking. It's used to be known as word speak in languages, in less commonly taught languages, such as like Hmong or Somali, some of the multilingual learners languages in Minnesota. And AP language culture exams and also international baccalaureate diploma program exams also count. So you have to identify what languages and then which assessment you use, right? So that's also kind of a work that you have to kind of be able to discern which assessment tools available in what languages kind of thing. You kind of have to really get yourself familiar with technology requirements and of course, cost. And then when you administer the assessment, like, logistics, right? How and then where and then when you do that, and proctors. So this is not one person's job, it's a teamwork. So that's how you can also build the capacity within your school or the school district. Lisa, do you want to add anything to step 2? All right. And then once you do the assessment, then you get the results from different testing companies. And then, so this is an example from Avant stamp test. So this is chart. This is, I believe this is a White-Zadard's chart, research chart, correct? Outlines which score is equivalent to Actofor's level and what would be the award. So Actofor's intermediate low equivalent to stamp, Avant stamp score 4, and that is a world language proficiency certificate award in Minnesota. The Minnesota State Colleges that awards 2 semesters college credit, and for the intermediate high would be the bilingual gold seal, and at the Minnesota State Colleges 3 semesters credit. So that for that score is 6, it's the equivalent from Avant. Here's a multilingual gold seal. So we oftentimes just say bilingual seal, but students can also demonstrate skills more than one language and like 2 or 3 languages. Then students can also receive a multilingual gold seal. So this kind of shows that. For the platinum seal is the Actofor's advanced law, and equivalent score is 7. In Minnesota, all 4 modalities are required. So those are 4 in all 4, each of the 4 modalities, 6, each of the 4 modalities. So when you are new, and if you may not so familiar with Actofor's proficiency guidelines, depending on your context, sometimes it's a kind of a learning curve for some people, but and of course each state has a different criteria. But in Minnesota, 4 modalities are required. So then the person have to look at each modalities to identify the awardees. Do you have anything to add, Lisa, here?
I think I just want to ask you a question. Participants might be thinking, well, what if a student does not score appropriately in all 4 modalities? What do you go with? How do you give them an award? Or how do you determine their award?
So again, in Minnesota, all modalities are required. So unfortunately, we've seen some cases students do very well on a 3 out of 4, but 1 does not meet, such as 1 modality is, let's say, novice high range. Then students, unfortunately, would not qualify for an award in Minnesota. And I'm not sure if that is true in all the other states, because again, each state has a different criteria. So that can be a little tricky too. I get lots of questions about that, and people are learning about how to do that piece. And another thing I may add is that so the stamp uses numbers, right? But then Actofor's Apple uses the word such as, it's a key, like I1 for intermediate low, I5 intermediate high, A1 for advanced low. So once you do it many times, you kind of memorize them, they are keys. So, but when you are working with many different languages with several different assessments, it can be a little bit tricky, and there's going to be a learning curve there. So once you identify the students, then MDE, Minnesota Department of Education asks people to fill out the form. Currently, it's done paper, but we're looking into digitalizing it in next couple of years. And the due date is October 31st. The reason is October 31st for the previous school year. The reason is that AP exams and IBDP exam also count, and then schools do not receive their results until summertime after seniors have graduated. So then we wait for that school to be able to process that results as well. And schools can retroactively award bilingual seals after students had graduated because the test was taken during that previous school year. So that's, I guess, one thing. Lisa, if you want to add something there.
Sometimes what I've done with our with students who might have signed up for a bilingual seal test, not an AP test or an IB test, if I were to get their results before the end of the school year, I would try my best to get the awardee information to our school's registrar so they could do the transcript notation as soon as possible for those graduating seniors. It's kind of very rare that a student will contact you and say, I need this on my transcript as soon as possible because I have schools that are looking at my transcripts early. So just to try to cover all of my bases, I just make a mental note for myself or in my calendar. I try to process the score data as soon as possible for those graduating seniors so we can do transcript notations as soon as possible. But it's just a little piece of unsolicited advice, I guess.
Right. The putting transcript information can be very time sensitive too. And I think we will talk a little bit later again. We'll come back to the transcript piece. It's kind of a step 5 and then step 6. I think they kind of transcript piece, I believe, is step 6. So the transcript piece and the record keeping kind of go hand in hand because in Minnesota, students have 3 years to request the college credit for their seal. And schools should retain the record. I mean, that is in a statute. So schools are asked to retain the record. So 3 years after graduation, students can come back to school and say, could you please verify? Or colleges may come back and say, I have these students requesting, I'd like to verify, right? So it's very important that the good record is kept. And then, so consideration would be, who would do that? Who would be the person or department who would manage that? And how you do that, right? And then what you probably need to keep. Each rating for the modalities, date of the test, and English language art credit status. So Lisa can talk about what she did in Wayzata.
Yes, here's an example. I've omitted student names for confidentiality, but here's an example of what your records could look like. I want to emphasize some really important parts would be graduation year, because you could have students in 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade all testing at the same time on the same day. However, they're not going to receive their award certificate if they earn one. They won't receive it until after they graduate. So you want to keep track of which graduation years you have running so you can just group those all together or sort your spreadsheet by graduation year. So you have that data available to you and easy to submit in Minnesota, easy to submit to IUME and Department of Education for October 31st when that is due. Obviously, what award the student earned, if any, and their proficiency level in actual terms, whether that's intermediate low, intermediate mid, intermediate high, advanced low. So I think those are the language too, what language they tested in, obviously. But those are some important parts, especially that graduation year. And like Ayumi said, the English language arts credits as well. That might be the job of the bilingual SEAL coordinator. That might be someone in registration with the district as well. It just depends on how it's set up and who has access to data.
Right. So in Minnesota, schools are allowed to provide periodic opportunities for students to test. So typically, I know that some student may take it as a grade 10 or 11, and then they get the results first time, and then they feel like they want to try again, which is, I believe it's a really good thing, right? They can set a goal and they can identify which area they can work on to improve. So that's a good thing. At the same time, the record keeping piece becomes very important for schools too. So that transcript notation considerations, again, who would do that, and then some type of technical setup. From my experience with the Minneapolis Public Schools, there are maybe dozen vendors that Minnesota schools work with. And of course, the schools outside of Minnesota to work with in terms of having this student information system that generates transcript, which typically tied to the courses that students take and then the grades that teachers enter, right? So that's a really kind of a big system. And I had to work with IT so that we could put some type of notation on a student's transcript. And then, so that is itself can be a lengthy process because, you have to work with IT person in a school or school district, and then they have to work with a vendor. And then they have to do the back and forth, they have to do the testing and then trial. So there may be some considerations depending on which student information system each school district uses. So that is something, if you are thinking about doing this, implementing this program, you definitely want to look into that. And then I'm not sure if other states requires the transcript notation, but in Minnesota, we do, it is required. So I have this Minnesota guidelines in terms of what language to use. The recommended guideline actually has name of the award and Actofor's level, proficiency level. But as a recommendation, we added which earns 4 semesters of college credit at the Minnesota State Colleges. The reasons that MDE has recommended this very specific language is because the transcript reviewers at the colleges are not necessary, and oftentimes they are not familiar with Actofor's proficiency guidelines. So even if in the world languages area, we know what Actofor's advanced low means. We know what intermediate high means, intermediate low, but the transcript reviewers typically, they don't know. So by being very specific like this, it's very helpful for them and then for the students. And I know that there are some technical limitations with the system. Sometimes, that you can have a certain number of characters on a transcript. So, but it's just as a guidelines.
And I'd like to add, Ayumi, for those wondering, like, where would I even start with transcript notations and getting the ball rolling? How would I find out like what vendor my district uses? Your school's registrar would be the first step.
Yep. So at the end, step 7, informing families and students, inform families about then what part. So students get excited about, right? Getting an award, and then if you host the ceremony type of thing and you celebrate, that's great, right? But then once they graduate from high school and then they go into college, right? Currently in Minnesota, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of really supporting the students smoothly articulate into the programs and receiving the college credit. But in the half, and one part is that also students and families, they have to make a request. It's not automatic. So knowing, informing about what they should do once they enter college, that is also important. So, but we try to keep improving that area too. So, and then perhaps celebration. Lisa, do you want to add anything around here?
Sure. I think the next slide will show in a couple examples of what informing families could look like. These are a couple letters that I used in the past when a student took the STAMP assessment through Avant. The example at the top, they're both just like form letters, but the example at the top is for a student that achieved an award, and the example on the bottom is for a student that did not yet achieve an award. In my experience, we would typically choose to send the information by mail to the students' houses so they have this letter. We also include the score report in a paper copy. Score reports can look different depending on what testing company you might go with, but it will typically include not only the student's proficiency level, but a description of what this means in language learning terms, in terms of their skills. What are they doing well? What are they able to do or can do for us language teachers? And what could they do as their next steps? We would also then, they would receive their certificate when they graduate. So they might be getting information mailed to their house at different times. Their results after they take the test, and then their certificate upon graduation. And depending on how many students are testing, you could email this information home as well. We would, over the summer, I guess, when you have your AP results coming in, you have your bilingual seal results coming in, you might have IB results coming in, there might be a large number of students, or in our large districts as well. That's a lot. So I have called on the help of, there's a person that does mailing in your district, maybe someone at the district level, or a secretary in another department, a district department, could possibly help with the printing and the mailing, the envelopes and all of that stuff. And then celebrations, like Araceli said at the beginning, this could look like a ceremony separate from the graduation ceremony. Some schools have an award ceremony just for seniors that might be receiving scholarships. This could be a part of that ceremony. Some districts will have students recognized at a school board meeting. They might receive a pin, they might receive a medal, a trophy, possibly cords that they could wear at graduation, indicating that they've achieved language proficiency recognition. Just some examples.
Thank you, Lisa. So I guess those are the steps. We're gonna wrap up and I will give it back to Karen.
Thanks. Araceli, you want to go ahead and do the wrap up?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we leave you with these two questions to reflect on. What will you do to ensure that the intentions of the seal by literacy are upheld in your school? And how will you encourage students of less commonly taught languages to take the seal by literacy test? We also want to remind you that about the 7 steps that we talked about, and to let you know that it is okay to seek help and support, that it's not a one person kind of deal. It's okay to, look for resources for guidance and assistance from your community, colleagues and colleagues. And then also too, to kind of reflect on is how will you encourage students who are heritage speakers to take the test as well, or to promote the test among the community. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's great to have colleagues like these where Araceli has so much experience with some of the research she's done with the intent and encouraging students, as well as Ayumi at the state level with all the expertise she brings, and then Lisa having worked at the district level as a coordinator in Wayzata and now at Extempore. So that's great. If you want to go to the next slide, we've got some resources there. The Extempore app, of course, there's bilingual, the MDE has bilingual seals program, and then there's also some steps to implement the seal of biliteracy. The other thing is the MCTLC Fall Conference is coming November 4th and 5th. We're going to be at Crown Plaza West, which is just outside of Minneapolis here. And so there will be some more information about the seals there for sure, as well as other opportunities. Is there anything that you want to add to any of this, Ayumi, maybe with a couple of these links, or are you good?
Somebody is asking if we could share the presentation slide. How do you know how that works?
I can put it in the chat, and then we can see that Extempore can add it to anything that's recorded. Yeah, I'll do that at the end here. Yep. So thank you. The next slide is just kind of our contact information, if you want to go to the next one there. And in addition to how you're going to uphold the intention of the bilingual seal and what next steps are you going to take, our final slide, I believe, before the survey is how are you feeling now? So if you want to play along and give us an indication of where you're at now, if you're still at help, that's fine. We're here. But maybe you're just kind of reeling with a lot to take in, or maybe it's like, okay, I think I got this now. Maybe you're at that level where you could teach someone else. So appreciate. I love it. Okay, lots of twos. That's very fair. Very fair. Yeah.
It's a lot of information to take in for sure. And like Ayumi said, this is not the work of one person. It definitely takes a team. So rope in your stakeholders and us as well. Feel free to reach out anytime. And any questions, we are monitoring the chat. So if something came up and you made a note of it, throw it in the chat and we'll get back to you.
So I'm going to just open the floor to any questions as I retrieve the link here for the slides. So go ahead and either type them in the chat or feel free to unmute and ask any question that you might have.
Thank you, Karen, for putting that link in the chat. If it doesn't work, to just click on it, try copying it and pasting it into your browser, and then you should be okay.
And then Michael, maybe I will email you that link as well, if that then can be put in with anything that was recorded.
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead and send that over, and I'll send it over to Grant and Thomas to see what they can do with it, if they can.
Or, yeah,
I know there will be a recording sent out, and our YouTube channel will have a recording of this either later on today or tomorrow. It should be uploaded if anyone wants to go back and rewatch.
brilliant. All right, so if there are any questions, let's see. You got one there. You want to take it, Lisa?
Sure. It might, I mean, whoever can answer it, go ahead. From Amanda, could you talk a little more about the differences when the seal of biliteracy is recognizing heritage languages that are not taught in school versus getting learners in school up to at least an intermediate low level?
Araceli, maybe do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think maybe that the intention is there that how we get the recognition for heritage learners and not just not learners that are necessarily learning a new language. Why don't you talk to that a little bit? You'll do it more justice than I will.
Oh, you said it. No, I think that I think recognizing, I think that the intent of seal biliteracy was to recognize in that students that speak another language at home other than English, for them to feel pride and for them to keep their home language alive, because when you get into school, everything is in English, right? So I think that acknowledging that, yes, our students come with different languages that they speak or at home. And I think that getting learners into a low level, I think is what the seal is kind of turning into for some states, as a way also too of like getting more students to come into their programs of language programs, but also too like recognizing that there are other tests that students can take, like AP test if they want it, a recognition as well. So I'm not sure, I think we're going in circles here, but I think that's what it is. That would be the difference. I have heard from other districts here in Minnesota that are more rural, that they say that their intent is to go after students who speak a language at home, to recognize that, to recognize them and to say, hey, we value what you bring into school, and keep up the great work that you're doing, and keep your language alive. And they also see a connection with the community and the parents too that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've seen this also used as an alternative. Maybe if the school doesn't have an IB program, or they don't have an AP program, or maybe a student is just not motivated by AP, for example. Here we have this other option that you could do. And so it can still get them that validation, whether the student is an English language learner or not. I think it's a way to also promote equity in language.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can add, at the same time, also the many heritage language learners whose languages are not taught at school, oftentimes they do not have access to instruction to support their literacy development. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a way to highlight their language asset visible, at the same time, highlight the needs to support their home language proficiency development. So it's kind of a service in both ways. So because with Extempore, we were able to put the test on online platform. That means this year is the first year that we have the data. So I'm just very excited to dig into the data to look at who is testing, who is getting the awards, and what their scores rating look like among the four modalities. So yeah, I'm super excited about that.
I love that, Ayomi. I was going to say something about, asset-based for students, but I love that, it's going beyond that. It's not only are we focusing on their various language proficiency as assets, but we're also highlighting a need. And I think that's really important too. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Any other questions from any participants, as you've had a little more time to think now? Well, I saw a lot of twos, so it is a lot of information to take in. I can put the link to the slides there again in the chat for anybody who would like to grab it now. And I just sent it off to Michael as well. So.
And I received it. Thank you, Karen.
Great. Beautiful. Full circle. Woohoo. All right. Well, with that, I think we will leave you to this lovely warm afternoon, at least in Minnesota. And thank you so much for coming. We'll hang out here for a little bit after the recording's off. And if there's anything that you want to pop on and ask us, that would be great. But otherwise, thank you so much for attending. The next step, actually, one more slide. Sorry, Ayomi, you want to go to the next one? And there's your feedback slide. I knew I was going to forget it, which is why I put it early in the presentation, as well as here. So if you could give Extempore and us a little bit of feedback by going to this QR code or else just going to that bit.ly URL, that would be awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a warm thank you to our presenters as well. Thank you for all the work and for doing this for us. I learned a lot myself, even working with Ayumi all year and Lisa on bilingual SEAL. So thank you very much.